late 60s, an astrophysicist by the name of Frank Drake tried to figure out what the chances were that there was a civilization out there that we could communicate with. And out of his thinking came the famous Drake equation, which is it consists of 7 variables, which multiplied together come out with a number of possible civilizations in our galaxy or in the universe. There's a write-up on it, an exhibit back there. I invite you to take out your calculators and put in your own figures and come up with your own number, and then we'll compare numbers. And then we'll go home tonight and sleep, and then we'll get up and we'll have our regular day, and probably won't think about that question. But for some people, that question stays with you, and it gnaws at curiosity, and it drives you to do remarkable things. And our guest tonight has exhibited a certain ingenuity, a passion, a dedication that has earned him a good deal of respect locally and nationally. So, with no other words here, and just one extra thing. John and I will be here Saturday from 1 to 4. So if you'd like to come in and talk further about his equipment, his journey, we'll be there. So, John Shepard, please give him a warm welcome.
Just to start out, I'm going to introduce the Project S.T.R.A.T, what it stood for, what it was, when it began. In 1972 is when I started what we call Project S.T.R.A.T, which is an acronym for Special Telemetry, Research, and Tracking.
Is that a microphone?
No, this is the real. So anyway, getting back to the point, I wanted to at least bring forth a little bit of history of the project and what we did and what the effort was to try to, I built machines and instruments from scratch to try and send signals into space in the hopes that maybe I could attract one of these unidentified flying objects or numerous phenomena of this type and measure it electronically on instruments, oscilloscopes, and other devices, radio frequency meters, and so forth. So it's trying to actually bring them into the lab, test tubes, so to speak, and analyze them, bring them to the lab, to hone them in. So I built equipment to do that, and I also broadcast music into space. So without too much further ado, from 72 forward, I did all this equipment, built all this stuff, and this is only a fraction of it that's here. There's much more. But this is kind of neat because this video kind of explains that in a very, very accurate way and is well produced. So it'll give you an idea of what it's like. It's got some still, it's got some good motion stuff in it. So I'll let it play and we'll go from there.
There seems to be within man a universal musical code, as if it is a higher language written into the very fabric of our DNA. Certain tones and frequencies evoke specific feelings and emotions within human beings. Is it possible that there are other beings in space who respond to this same universal symphonic language? John Shepard of Kuwait, Michigan, believes it's possible. He has broadcasted musical signals out into space for decades, attempting to communicate with advanced intelligences. So, John, where did this all begin?
It began in my early years and my fascination with electricity and the unknown. For the unknown is a mystery to be solved. I always kind of considered myself an explorer. I would be looking for deeper meanings in things and why they are what they are.
There's no doubt that John has a fascination with extraterrestrials.
The thing about ET to me is I feel like there's there's an incredible knowledge base out there. Why, shouldn't we communicate with them? Why shouldn't we study them? Why should they share ideas with us or us with them? We could advance so fast, so far.
John's electronic projects started growing more and more. As they started to take over his grandparents' home, they encouraged John in his endeavors.
One of the things that we did was I set up a 150-watt vertical market beacon transmitter. We called it for short BMB. And the device was designed to send out binary tone codes, 16 different notes that were adjustable, and they would run 24 hours a day, these tones, and would be sent out electronically on the ULF band into the ionosphere to try to hone these extraterrestrial devices or beings in. Then there was this one interesting incident between Shishpond and Shanty Creek near a power substation that powered these two resorts. Guy driving his pickup truck down the hill, and when he got down partway down that hill, his truck stopped, immediately stalled out, power went out, his lights, everything. And he described what he thought was an object like this, like a spherical object with a ring around it, like Saturn, the planet. He might have been there 3 or 4 minutes. He looked up and it just began to lift up and fly away. And when it did, he was able to restart the truck. That's from the sheriff's department interview description that I actually heard and saw the written notes on it.
With the help of his grandparents, John was ready for the next phase of his broadcast station. It was time to add a 20-foot addition to the family home.
I built this huge project, a research facility. We called it Project S.T.R.A.T, Special Telemetry Research and Tracking. That was the acronym for the operation as a whole. And it included the transmitting of music, it included the searching and detection of unidentified aerial phenomena, and it involved all that kind of thing, as well as connecting with people who have maybe seen unidentified flying objects and discussing it and writing it down, making notes, recording these reports. So it was kind of an all-in effort to try to evaluate this phenomenon that kept coming into our space, into our time.
John had started gaining attention from many news outlets.
People who were in the news business or in newspapers or what have you, the media, became interested because one would tell a story and the media would pick up. So there'd be this little flurry of activity. Then what got interesting is later on, when all this was kind of circulating on the national stage, you even got to appear on Joe Rivers, which was kind of fun. And there were numerous other things, documentaries. Now, of course, there's a Netflix thing, and many things in between I can't even remember them all.
It is recommended that you watch the Netflix original documentary entitled John Was Trying to Contact Aliens, directed by Matthew Gillen. There you will learn much more about John's personal life.
That's it. It's Project S.T.R.A.T Station 1, which is broadcasting to you from beautiful northwestern Michigan. And closing out our program tonight, it's a little music of Stephen Helper. He's titled Black Rock. One of the things I'm working on now is we're setting up a studio here. Well, I've had a studio most of my life in one form or another, but this is more the kind of studio you would broadcast programming from, music programs, kind of like we did with Project S.T.R.A.T for Station 1. But now we're doing it in the form of podcasts. That's what we're just getting into. I'm also recording a bunch of music productions from my own work. So combining these ideas as well as playlists from other musicians and artists who do similar things. So music is a great medium for expressing that, sharing that, opening that realm up to the mind, to the intellect. Music is a key, and so is sound.
John Shepard continues on his pursuit of the unknown. I had a fascinating time visiting John in his studio. His love for music, sound, and the unexplained resonates soundly with all of us.
Yes, this is my grandparents' home and between Central Lake and Bel Air, over in Antrim County. Well, very in Antrim County. But anyway, over right on the lake, we have a big house or cottage, and the addition is already on in this picture, but and the tower is already up. But this all this started in 1972. And I had an interest since way back when I was a kid. Like I was in 1965, 60, 68, 67, during that time. There was also if you remember, the Ann Arbor swamp gas reports. And Dr. Alan Hynek was called in to investigate for the Air Force as to what all these phenomena was, these objects that people were seeing. Well, that was broadcast, that some of that was covered by WJR radio, AM radio at the time. And I was quite young. I mean, this is way back in the 60s. This is low, 64, 65. And I was fascinated by what I was hearing. It really stirred my imagination to want to know more. Man, what are there really alien ships, or what are these things? You know, where are they coming from? And then shortly after all that was going on, there was, of course, a wonderful series called Outer Limits. I saw that, and I saw the first episode, The Galaxy Beam, the pilot episode, I was immediately inspired to do what he was doing. And even in that segment, it was like he was trying to send signals out into space to try to contact alien civilizations or intelligences. And he had this incredible setup from this radio station, drawing all the power, well, out of their air power, the power from the transmitter to this system he was using to send signals out. And of course, in the film or in the series, he made contact, and this thing appeared inside of this chamber, this galaxy beam, this electric force, electric energy beam. And it's really great the way they did the special effects. Well, there's all electronics involved. You know, this technology of electronics, screens and instruments and transmitters and electronic equipment to do this. So that inspired me to actually start trying to learn electricity, electronics, all that, and build my own stuff. And my grandfather was instrumental in helping me because he wasn't so much an electronics person as he was a machinist and tool and die maker. So he taught me the skill of taking steel, bending it, shaping it, grinding it, drilling holes, threading the holes, the screws and nuts and bolts would go, you could tighten things up, you could mount things, you could align them precisely, make a perfect cabinet to put everything in. So I was able from that to learn how to take just raw materials and make my own cabinets, make my own electronic stuff, modify cabinets that maybe already existed to work for what I needed. And as I learned electronics and electrical systems and how they work together, the components and stuff, I was finally able at the time to actually build things like this, oscilloscopes, and the 14-inch cathode rays like you see in a television monitor, but then wire it from scratch, build the circuits that make it work. From scratch, not just take an old TV and try to make it work. Build an actual system from the ground up. And that's just a tiny example of that. I built many of those in my day. And they all worked quite well. They were fun, they were wonderful for displaying audio frequencies, which that's what a basic demonstration of that is there. So that you kind of get an idea of how it worked. But so I started out in 72 when I moved into the house with my grandparents. And that's when I started actually assembling equipment, and it started in the bedroom house. It was an innocent thing. Let's see if we've got this button right here. This is another view of the house and some of the towers that put up on the side. That's the addition that was added on for the studio. That's a little later. The house was really originally just that, part of that addition. Okay, yeah, that's a better view of the addition, but that was the cottage, and it's the lakeside of it. Okay, this is where I first set up that broadcast board in the bedroom of the house. It's like an 11 by 10 bedroom. It wasn't huge. And there's a 23-inch oscilloscope that I built in a big, tall, floor-to-ceiling rack. And then there's the B&B. You'll see several views of that. That's the variable marker beacon, which transmitted 150-watt ULF radio signal into space. It's a very small tower, but it's enough to get to the ionosphere that, to maybe attract something from out there. And then once I got the broadcast board set up, I was able to work with music more and build bigger transmitters equipment like this, which all that is on that side, that's receiving equipment over there, screens and stuff, this is transmitting. There was, I was working up from like 150 watts to 400 watts. That was like the next step in this phase here. So they built the system with all the power supply and everything. And still managed to run it up 120 volt standard outlet. It got a little warm, but it never melted. So that was good. Although there were times, very interesting times, where that power switch box at the very top would had sparks pop out of it. That much power when it kicked in. The transformers pulled in. And it actually threw sparks and they'd light on the floor. So I had to upgrade that a little bit. But we got through it. And nothing burned down, nothing really blew up. There's the 96 channel custom built signal analyzer, signal oscilloscope, analyzer monitor system. That thing weighed about 700 pounds. That was a big unit. It's 8 feet wide, 6 feet, 4 inches high, and quite deep, and on wheels. It was big. Barely rolled through the doorway. But yeah, it was a big monster. It's like if you've ever seen the Irwin Allen production of the time tunnel, they had banks of things like this in that. And that inspired me to design one like that. And that's a 21-inch oscilloscope screen, custom built, just like that, in there, and all the circuits tied together to do what it would do with analyzing signals. And on the left is, that's a better shot of the vertical marker region. The very first transmitter that started out at 150 watt transmitter. That's the one that sent out the binary tones, 16 different notes. It would change, I could change the tones, and it would go through the sequence. So it would repeat the binary sequence. So that was a basic communication form for music or that. So, and I still have that, and it still works. It's not fun to use much because we don't have room for it, but it's in the house. It's stored. We have it. I was able to save that. So, and this is later on, the equipment started to expand out of the bedroom into the living room. The growth thing was beginning to happen. It was like a cancer. It's taking over the house. The reel-to-reel tapes, that's what I used for a lot of the music until cassettes came along and those more. But then again, here we have another bank of monitoring, audio monitoring equipment with a 17-inch oscilloscope that I built. And then more audio monitoring and reproduction equipment for the reel-to-reel system, amplifier, monitors, and the scope. So you could see what it was sending out. So you could see how clean the music signal was and things like that. Then also I had another tape deck over there, so I could switch between tape decks with different forms of music or different pieces, kind of like a DJ would do. And you can really see the difference when you look at the living room there and look, and there's the bed and pull. The floor to ceiling, it was packed, so it had to vibrate a little. And another view of the same setup with the screens and the oscilloscope setup and tape decks and stuff. So, got a little stack of tapes and just ready to go on top. I remember that very well. And it was a great little system. Here I am working on another piece of equipment, wiring and soldering all the little connections that go into making the unit work, system work. And that was some of these machines, these units that I built, cabinets and all, took months, sometimes 6 to 8, 12 months. I mean, almost years. So it was a long process, but I would have to say it was very rewarding just in building new machines and being inspired to try and find out answers. And bringing all that together was kind of magical as a person, as a creative being. So that carried me through. Just working with this stuff was fun. It's beyond a hobby because it got quite big. But close up of some of the things I'm soldering and the circuit board there, I'm looking. Maybe all these little connections soldered together so it works. Yeah, I did like so much of that. I can remember reading a lot of soldering. Very tough. And there I'm closing it up. It's pretty much ready to go for the first one to test it out. And it's up and running. That's when I actually had it all fully operational. And it had a little 14-inch, kind of like that one there, 14-inch oscilloscope in it. So again, you can see the audio frequency and see how clear it was, see the range it was working in and its amplitude. and all on that screen. So once I looked at it, the transmitting system, I was able to broadcast music. That was on the beginning. And the BNB could be modified to send that signal out with from heads versus using just the binary sequences. So you could send a musical, you could do that as well. There's a better picture, a color picture of the system when it's present and what it looked like with the stove and everything. Then I had laboratory electronics oscilloscope there on the left. Sliding down there and changing stuff, working stuff. And tapes, lots of real reels on the top there. Some more pictures of me with the equipment. And the bedroom had viewers in the bedroom there. There I am just relaxing, doing what I do, and it's like play. You can even see the motion of the tape that's on the machine, time exposure, of course. This was all taken, by the way, with a 35 millimeter also S.R.A.T. 101 film. This was before digital. So I was doing all my stuff with real film. So it was great. Got some really good exposure. You really see the colors, natural lighting. I worked a lot on natural light and photography. It brings out realism, brings out certain things. When you want to do special effects, you do things with light. But when you want the natural look, or what it really looks like, you just kind of go with that. And that's what I did. Flash wasn't used much. There's another nice shot of the system in there. Oh yeah, and then I had a 19-inch oscilloscope. It built up there too. So I had all these oscilloscopes display the electrical signals and audio signals, like voice, whatever. Or anything received in the case of that, it was the receiving system for monitoring the signals coming back. Anything you might be out there. There's Sean working with that 96 channel analyzer. They synchronize the console, that's still long for it. And we got another monster scope I built, just a little while later. It's even scope. And and there's that device there that powers the buy and signal integrator that helps run the oscilloscope. What you see there is part of what was in this day and age here, late 1970s, going into the 80s, with the transmitter system, where the sparks came on, transmitter and the main power supply for the transmitter. Two big machines, very hard, heavy, running on maxing out the 120 volt inputs. Another nice close-up of the VME, vertical mark with the transmitter. Those pulses would be indicated on the lights there, with different lights with flash and you could turn the speaker on and hear it, you could calibrate it and adjust it and everything from that one panel. It was really easy to use. I mean, pretty straightforward, no computers, no digital, it's not other than the binary electronics, which in that case was maybe the only digital place. Everything else was analog. Telephones, real telephones now. Even the guy that carrying your top. I got a hotline, had all that switching equipment for communications and receiving. Big, heavy, everything was big and heavy back then. Those great things are all relay cabinets. They're full of zillions of relays, like telephone relays. That's what they were. Like you have a telephone back in the day, or the digital or solid state switching. So those things would click away, you get a signal and it started clicking on 8. And you hear these things come in, then you can check it on the oscilloscope. Electrostatic, electromagnetic detector, primarily electrostatic, it would detect the changes in electrostatic field in the air, atmosphere nearby. It's actually fairly close, but it could detect like lightning, stars, things like that coming in. So it would show up on that little 5-inch oscilloscope, and I could plug in that larger one up there to display other information from the system too. That's actually setting up there up front on the table there down below. That scope at the very top. But that was some of the stuff I built. Then we had to build more power supplies to run the stuff that was upstairs in the bedroom. Yeah, finally had to get up to 240 volt input with controllers and voltage regulators. So we called this the power core. It was downstairs right below the bedroom. And the cables went right up to the bedroom to run that other equipment. Because it was all like, you started getting more power draw big transformers and used for the transmitting side of the system. That was the transmitting, that was the power supply. The power of the transmitter, which then fed the transformer, sent the signal up. So you had to step the audio frequency up to a very high voltage, because you needed to couple it in peaks, like a radio signal. You need to couple it to the air. To transmit, you have to get it high enough, because the electrons have to go up and transmit, release. If you have a low level signal, we'll say an audio output, you can pick it up, but you have to be right on top of it. With this, you could get the voltage up to 9,000 volts or more, and then it would start to transmit nicely. You get a radiation gradient signal. The signal will go out, and that's basically what I get. And in the later years, there's a big close-up of the power regulator and voltage control system. That's all hand built, everything, and wired. There was the tower later on, that was the main tower we used for the music broadcast. That one was 26 feet high, big steel tower. It was actually the two sections of the tower, vertical, those were from a ski lift system. That was at Shanty Creek in the old days. They sold the metal scrap. I bought it, had pieces made and rounded it, had it all put up. My friends helped get it all installed. We got powered it up one day and it started working great. It was like, you wouldn't think, but that's what worked really well. Then again, more power was needed, so the transformer got bigger. Everything got bigger. Here we got 50 kVA, they call it, power line transformer. It's a 14,000 volt transformer. So now we're up to 14,500 volts or more. And same voltage regulating equipment, we're getting under strain a little bit. So that, like I say, we have to get a little bigger transformers. So we're getting up in the voltage and current demand. Oops, oh, that's the end. Okay, that's it. So that's what I did for all those years, to put all that together and make it possible, or maybe contact something that might be out there. And who knows, there's been so much lately. When you hear what's been seen and what's been reported, and what's been supposedly retrieved, it gets you thinking. And of course, a lot of the congressional investigations, the subcommittees have been looking into all this to find out what the government people really know, depending on the DIA and so on and so forth. There's so many agencies, and some of them are actually pretty well hidden. So they didn't even know about the aerial identification program thing until like somebody leaked a video. I mean, then all of a sudden, oh, we didn't know that was going on. You just told us, It's very appropriate for money to do a lot of these things. So it was sort of buried in the black budget or, a military spending budget somewhere. But in any case, there was all this, they were concerned about what these things were, how they would affect, say, national security, aerospace operations, air travel. Just recently, I think it was an F-16, they got hit by one of these objects. It hit the back of the cockpit. The pilot had to come land. It did some damage. They actually did physically hit something. Something hit them. But what's interesting is it said hit it from the back. Jets go forward. They don't go backwards. So this thing must have been moving really fast to intercept and hit the cockpit from the rear side. And another thing that's really interesting, it's mentioned up there, but if you look up a spherical UFO or object recovered from Boca, Colombia, you'll find that there was a report of a spherical object, about 2 feet in diameter, seamless, no seams, no wells, no holes, none of that, recovered in the woods. It was videotaped. Somebody with their phone caught it zigzagging across the sky, and I guess they followed it, and it landed in the woods. And this one guy recovered it. And he said he poured water in it, he claims, and the steam came out, a lot of steam. That was really hot. And he says, I touched it, I tried to pick it up, and at first I guess he said that he felt ill after he finally was able to carry it and recover it and bring it in, but the government wanted it. The government wanted real bad to get this. And he didn't turn it over to him, but he turned it over to Jamie Masan, who's a reporter down in Mexico that covers a lot of this stuff. And he's got scientists and people he works with. So they sent it to a lab and they've been examining it. And it's very interesting because in the x-rays, they found there's like 18 microspheres inside of this thing. And there's like layers, maybe layers in metal, different inner layers. And there seems to be a core, like some kind of, they call it a chip, whether it's power source or what it is inside this thing, plus these 18 microspheres, which are little dots in there. You can see them on one of the x-ray graphs. Very interesting. It also has like hieroglyphics written on it, symbols. And the symbols I tried translating with AI, and it was like a message, something about unity of power, unity of light and energy. It was really interesting what it had to say. It was like a message to us, I guess. You know, best I can determine, it's like a message to us. But this thing, this technology, this device, landed and somebody recovered it. And it did turn to the government. They didn't get there in time to get it. So it got some interesting stuff out there according to this report. So something very recent, it's a fresh news, something worth, you know, looking at sometime.
How long ago was that?
What's that?
How long ago was that?
I think it was, well, what was it? Wasn't it just like recent?
Recently, like months ago,
Yeah,
just months ago.
a month or two ago.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it was this year, I believe. But look it up just to be sure. But we have a little bit of it on here in one of the.
I haven't posted it yet.
Oh, that's
Better be in your exhibit downstairs, sorry.
That's all right. We can cover it. We can always have, folks can always look this up. It's all over again. Google will pull it up, no problem. Anyway, it's worth looking at. And there's so much more. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the things I've seen, the things that I witnessed, documents I've seen that leaked out that are absolutely close to astounding that I don't know how to word. There was this one document that I got my hands on. It's all, these are serendipitous things that happen. You can't explain them, but you think they're more than coincidence sometimes. So. And the documents, I have the digital copies, I don't have the printout, but the printout will be a pretty good stack. And they had recovered a type of drone device, some kind of an observational platform drone that could just levitate and power itself by symbols. That was the mystery. That was the thing that really had the guys in Silicon Valley trying to figure it out. And the military contracted with them to try to decipher this thing. How's it work? What do these symbols mean? And so on. And apparently, the symbols are the power source and the control. The symbols somehow, instead of having like we think of a keyboard and we type in something in a command, the symbols are the command. The symbols make it work without that kind of interface that we think of as like a computer or would program something. It's already there. And it's some kind of really advanced nanotechnology and powered by energy sources we haven't even quite conceived of yet. We're getting close. I think we're getting very close to something like that someday soon. There are people working on what first note called cold fusion. Now it's led to such assisted nuclear reactions or low energy nuclear reactions. There's a guy in Italy that's been working on a thing called ECAT. It's a very interesting, it's probably closest to what would be called a ZPM, zero-point molecule, a way to source energy from all around us, from the subatomic world, basically, from quantum physics, to be able to tap energy that basically is limitless. It's all up to the technologies, how reliable it is, and how it's going to be able to continue to do this for a period of time. He guarantees these things for 10 years. Well, we'll see. Well, I hope to get one. And to get one, I'll let everybody know how, if it works or it fails. But I got a feeling they're onto something. And this is only one company. There's another one known, and look up Brilliant Light Power sometime. They're working on a fusion, high-density plasma fusion reactor that's very small. The thing could sit on this surface right here in the power plant and water circulating unit. It works with a gallium metal to create the fluid flow. But when it's up and running, it's capable of nearly 1 million watts of power. A small device. I mean, no nuclear radiation now. This is not nuclear in the sense of fission bonds. This is fusion. This is a process of transmutation. It's different and it's safer, and but nearly limitless power. I mean, compared to what we're using now. And the thing that's interesting about the low energy nuclear reactions, the other devices which operate at a lower temperature than this thing I did mention, is that it's a transmutation of one material to another, is what it basically is. But it takes so long, you can put, like 2 or 3 grams of fuel in this thing on material, and it takes years to use it, to change it from one state to another. But in that process, you're releasing energy, heat. That's the first process. You release heat, some electrons. So you've got an energy source here that could be very, very beneficial over time. We'll see how it turns out. I've been keeping very close tabs. So anytime you folks want to ask some questions, I'm open to hearing. Yes?
What section of the galaxy was your target?
There was no specific section. What I did, as the Earth rotated, the signal would move across the sky. So there was no definite target. It was, as the Earth changed position each season, and as the Earth rotated, that became the way to scan the sky or send the signal across vast areas of space. So my main objective in sending the signal out was in the hopes that something traveling nearer to the Earth, some intelligently controlled craft or intelligence could pick this up and follow it in, and hone them in to where I could take measurements on instruments and record data and try to determine what these things were a little bit. That was really the goal. But I sent music out because it's sort of universal. Music is sort of the universal language. But we started with just binary tones. I mean, just sending out time pulses, which are on-off sequences, which can represent numbers or represent characters. And that seems to be one of the primary things now I've learned that they communicated with us by is binary code. If you've ever seen the crop circles in England and some of those places, they were genuine ones. There's one that's just astounding. If you remember when we sent the Voyager out, one of those spacecraft with a disc on it, had the genetic codes, it had the music, it had the songs of Humpback Whale. We even transmitted those too, but just to get back to the point, they sent this disc out, and the most interesting thing about this circle was one crop circle. It was huge. It was gigantic. It was 2 things. Ironically, it was right next to a radio telescope facility. Yeah, right on the field, right next to it, and it's huge, gigantic. And there's another graph by it, and the graph shows the genetic code with some modifications to it, different, like of theirs. And there's also a disc. We would call it like a DVD or CD. And in there was binary code sequences that represented language or a message. It's the darndest thing you ever saw, and it was incredibly precise. And it's been photographed. You can probably look it up anytime nowadays. But it's fascinating. It just makes you think, well, I don't think Doug and Dave did that. That was so intricate and so complex and appeared overnight. And these, right next to an observatory, that's a research facility for this. Just like, yeah, that's almost too much to be coincident or just a trick. Anyway, that's a small example of some of the things that may have occurred. But back in the 50 years ago, apparently it said that we may have already made contact with them. So that's an interesting thing. Go ahead. Any more questions, please?
You also received, did you ever receive anything of suspicion?
Yeah, matter of fact, it was interesting. During the 1973 UFO flap that occurred pretty much all over the country, although we had quite a few right in Antrim County and around the area here, I did pick up some unusual electromagnetic signals coming in over the power lines. Instead of the normal 60 hertz that you get, we got in addition to that, like 120 and 300 hertz, fading in and fading out as though something was inducing a magnetic field into the power lines as it traversed or traveled over them. So I was picking this stuff up right at the time that people were reporting sightings around the area, right in the immediate area, real close to where I live. And I had the sheriff called me. I mean, I got a hold of them. I said, or they got a hold of me, and I told them, you know, this is really weird. We're picking up some electromagnetic signals or disturbances coming in over the power line. And they sent a deputy out and said, yeah, we've been getting calls. We've been getting calls on things that people are seeing, objects that have been hovering or moving, darting around the field. And I said, yeah, we're getting these magnetic signals. And I showed it to them right on the screen. You can see it. It's funny because you get the 60 hertz, it's just a loop. And then you see these wavy lines appear on it, just fading in and fading out, like, again, like something moving across it. It's creating a magnetic induction. So I showed them that, and they took that back to the office, that report, and there were other things that happened. There was the incident on Chute Mountain Road where, by the substation, you saw in the video, the guy was driving his truck down from the hill. He finished working up there, and he come down the hill. There's a substation here, power lines go overhead, and the road goes right between the substation, some of these distribution lines. And he said this thing was just like come right down, was hovering right over the road. It looked like a big circular object with windows. Except it didn't have like weird rectangular windows in it, and the light, you could see glowing coming from inside, but no light cast out on the ground. And I said I had rings, kind of like Saturn around it. And he said, because I drove up, tried to drive up to it, the power stopped. The truck shut right off, couldn't run, couldn't start it, and the lights went out, everything. So it just hovered there for a few minutes, then it started to take off and fly up over the power line even and fly away. And as soon as it flew away, he was able to restart the truck with the key. And the one or two of the plow lights were burned out from that incident. It blew the lights and burned out the elements. This is before LEDs, of course. So it had an effect, I guess it blew some fuses and some light bulbs. And of course I asked the sheriff's department, did you save any of the fuses or light bulbs? Did anybody ask for this as evidence? No. Well, they just threw them away. I said, oh, well, there goes your evidence of the effect of what this was. We could analyze that, could find out how much power and transitional energy that they were transmitting. So that was one thing. I mean, there was a number of things. There was also some sightings. There was a sighting. I was at this is so ironic, of course. I was at the show one night, the theater in Townsville there. And there were some people out fishing, friends, and they were out there in the bowl, not far from where I live on the lake. They were right out there. They could see something come over and hover right over where the house was. They said, it's right over there. And I said, well, too bad I wasn't home, because they saw this thing, and he said, we came in off the lake. It freaked us out. And that was a reaction. They were fishing, and, and they saw that, and they said, it was the weirdest thing. It was hovering over your house, and it just hovered there for a few minutes, and then it took right out. It just flew away. I said, we got...
Is that in daylight or dark?
I think it was nocturnal. I think it was nighttime, evening or night, because I was at the show, so it would have been probably after dark or later in the evening. Yeah, because I even know the person. I think I probably could get a hold of him. He wrote me recently, emailed me and told me, he said, boy, I remember that incident. If you ever want me to tell him, like, share this with him, feel free to ask me. So, I've got somebody actually saw it. So again, to answer your question, to sum it up, there's been things that could be considered coincidental or circumstantial that occurred right around the same time I was transmitting the signal out. So maybe they detected it, maybe they didn't. But the funny thing is, they were in our area. They were flying around very close to where I was. And they affected even the airport's new ILS system. There was a bright blue flash over the airport right by the runway, where they have an ILS transmitter with microwave. It's an early version. And they reported this flash of light. The Air Force guy came to me and mentioned it and said there's something weird happened. And ever since then, we've been getting reports. And I said, yeah, it is strange that blue flash of light happened, and then all of a sudden people are seeing these things. So it's all that happened right around the same time, fall 73. So, any other questions?
Yes, I have. Well, in your opinion, if contact was made positively, what would the political, religious, and social ramifications be, not only in the United States, religious-wise also, throughout the world, what do you think would happen?
Oh, it'd be a tremendous shift. There'd be quite a shift in how we perceive things and understand the greater things. It would kind of have the effect of restructuring a lot of our beliefs and restructuring how government looks at things, okay? If they already know, some of them already know about this, and even I think the Pope knows. I think there are records in the archives that could also verify this. But the fact is, when the whole public knows about it, people's perceptions of everything we know changes. That's why I think the government and so many people in authority did not want this stuff to get out, because it would upset the norm. It would change the norm. I see it as an advancement myself. Now, that's my own opinion. I see it as advancing dramatically, intellectually, understanding things better, understanding the creator better. I don't think it eliminates that. I don't think it should change that. We would just have a deeper understanding, a more complex understanding. We'd realize that we're not the only ones, that there is life out there, and numerous life, and many forms of it, and intelligent life. That's what I think you'd see. And the government's political structure would change, yes. I think a lot of the political things that we have now would take on a drastic change, because it wouldn't be so easy to control or brainwash or infiltrate people's minds the way they do now. Unless they can convert that new knowledge to something they can use, it would free our minds. We'd suddenly realize we're not, this is not all there is. And then we'd be thinking a little harder. I think we'd think a little more. I think it'd be good for us.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Good question. Yes, Tom.
Since the Netflix documentary, you've been contacted by people around the world, I'm guessing, and has there been anybody else doing similar work and have results from it?
There's been a few people that have contacted me. They haven't, it's interesting because most of them that contacted me were people that were interested in the subject itself, or were really pleased with the film and thought it was a wonderful story and told a lot. So that was most of it. I was almost like fan mail, a really good fan mail. Yeah, but I think there was like one or two people who were research people who did ask about what kind of results did I have? Did I get much results? And that they were working along similar lines. I think there were at least two of those that had good questions. And I had some good answers. I told them, I said, it's an ongoing search. We have to keep working on this. But I think we should also be looking at what the people in the intelligence community and the government already know. A lot of this is old hat. They've already possibly made contact. So, you can look at it in a number of ways. But that was something, good question, Tom, because, yeah, I did get a couple of emails or messages from people that were doing similar work and wanted to see if I had any extra insight. And I did offer some.
On your 96 panel machine,
Yeah.
are you looking to measure wavelength? If so, longer wavelengths?
Correct, yes, up to like 24 or 25 kilohertz. It was very low frequency range. It was like this very low end of the spectrum. I had other instruments that go higher, but that was the one I used because of the electromagnetic disturbances on the power line being of a lower frequency. So I thought that by having those 96 channels in that full range, as far as that range, I should be able to pick something up and analyze and be able to see it and record it. So yes, I used it for mostly the low end, 24 kilohertz and below.
Is that going to travel better through space?
It depends. Yeah, it depends. The low frequencies have an extremely long range. Once you get them propagated, once you get them moving, they carry quite a distance. The submarine, the low frequency submarine communication systems are really low frequency, and they travel through the Earth really well. Of course, you've got the Earth to conduct them, but it carries really a long distance. But in the thing that you run into with those frequencies like I'm using or was using during this is that they are low frequency, so your range is affected by certain atmospheric conditions and other background noise, space noise, things like that. You're always gonna have that. And your distance factor is it's gonna drop off eventually with distance, just like any radio signal does. So, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah,
And then 150 watt, how do you know that's getting the distance you want? I mean, you were young when you started doing this, so you know, how to get up.
that's right. And the one thing we did with that to try and verify a little bit, but I'd like to have been up in a plane and taken measurements higher up, but we went up in a cherry bucket, way up above the antenna, and boy, it was louder than the dickens with that receiver that could pick up that frequency. And it was like a high gain operational audio amplifier, so you could pick up with a sensor probe or a small antenna, and the signal was really loud. It was just like, boom. I've got one up there.
So you figure it's going to carry you for,
Yeah, I used it, went up quite a way up above the antenna. The one tower that we started with was like, 15 feet high. It wasn't as big as the big one there that you saw. That was for the music mainly. The VMB and then the music was switched over to that. But the smaller antenna, we could get way up above it and take measurements, and boy, it was putting out good. I mean, for 150 watts, it seemed like it was really blasting out. So I think it at least reached the ionosphere. Let's say that. That's what I figured in the long run. And that's,
did you have a schematic making your own equipment? Something to go by and go,
I didn't really have a schematic other than what I grew up or a friend and I would draw up, but most of the time I would just figure it out. I'd work it out in real time, build the circuits and test them. And I was always within the ballpark. It was like just a few tweaks here and there and it'd work. I'd have it run. Same with the oscilloscopes thing. I pretty much knew how to do all that. It just kind of came to me. A lot of it was intuition, but I had studied enough in electronics to understand the components and what they did. So it made it relatively easy. Any other thoughts or questions?
So this shows in your house all this equipment. Did you have anything mobile that, like back in, you know,
Right.
50 years ago, when all these sightings were happening, of which I witnessed one, could you go to that location where they were being sighted to use some of your equipment there?
Yes, matter of fact, that was one of the things I worked on, and up on the table there and on that podium stand is some of those portable devices that I developed, along with a Geiger counter and some other instruments. So I could go to where those things are being seen and not only photograph them, but maybe capture some of the electromagnetic signals or measure some parameters that would be present. Yes, matter of fact, I did, because I had to get mobile. You can be in one location forever and maybe nothing will ever come by. So you often have to go to the hot spots where something happened. Very good question.
What I witnessed, it was later, the next day, there was an article, all these people had seen the same thing that I saw with a girlfriend and my brother-in-law. And it was, we were at Sleeper State Park in the Thumb, and so it was Lake Huron, nothing for however wide Lake Huron is there. And we saw this thing, we couldn't figure out what in the heck it was. Certainly wasn't a helicopter, it certainly wasn't a fast jet that could all of a sudden stop and start spinning and all these colors and everything. And in the paper, you know, they were saying, what is this, what is this? Well, the answer from the government was, it was swamp gas.
Oh, nice.
Swamp gas.
Oh, boy, that's a pretty accurate swamp dance. Boy, that's pretty energetic. I doubt that. No, they were very good at saying, well, not that good, but they would come up with these wonderfully strange explanations for everything unusual. It was a weather balloon. It was a flight of birds. It was swamp gas.
Swamp gas. No, we were sitting on a huge log and just talking and stuff, and it was night, and we were looking at the stars and everything. Well, I saw this bright light way off in the distance, like it was on the horizon of Lake Huron. And we said, well, that must be a ship. Well, it's not moving. And then, you know, a while later, it started coming up.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, that's not a ship.
Oh,
And then all of a sudden, they went, boom.
oh,
And then
well,
it went boom over this way, and then it went boom over this way, and then it like, you know, disappeared. And then it was back over here.
Yeah.
And then it started spinning and all these colors and everything. And then it disappeared again, and then it appeared, oh, back over this way. And we were like, oh my God, what is that?
What was you guys thinking?
Exactly.
I was afraid.
You know that's not a helicopter, and you know it isn't a ship, for sure. And obviously not an airplane.
Not an airplane, not a helicopter, not swamp gas.
No, swamp gas does not move like that. And it doesn't have all those colors normally either. But that's a very interesting story. Thank you for sharing that. Some of the activity period.
That's why I was curious if you ever took any of your equipment and picked up stuff.
Yes, yes, I did. Whenever possible, whenever I had mobility, I did it. I went out to the field and tried to detect these things. And
And you could say that at the same time with other activities, people saw other things at time zone.
yeah, well, that was during, actually, that was what she's describing, 64, 65 was during the Ann Arbor Dexter UFO sightings. I think that's about the same time there was quite a bit of this activity in Michigan and all around the country, but Michigan was getting it pretty strong. So I think her report matches up pretty close to the time that the Dexter Ann Arbor sightings were occurring. So, and it wasn't until 73 that this whole thing started up again, and there were a lot of sightings in our area and all over the United States, actually, but we had a lot of them in Michigan, a lot of them. Yes, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I've read about some of the artists, some of the music that you have broadcast over the years. I would assume that the podcast is broadcasting some of your current interests and influences, but I wondered if you'd share some of the music that you're gravitating towards now.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I'm doing all of electronic music now, and I like to just sit down and compose live. I just sit down and play. Oh, probably, I'm trying to think of, there's so many great musicians out there that do this kind of music. I mean, I'm not alone, not the only one. There's Stephen Halperin, there's Mark Duane, he's really lively, does really interesting music about Mars and the aliens on Mars and all this kind of stuff. He's a great inspiration for some of my music. And there's so numerous others. So Tangerine Dream was one that really got me started. I heard their music and I was just blown away. That's the coolest stuff in the world. And this is back in like 75, 74, earlier times when they were doing the really creative stuff and doing all of that. And that just amazed me. I love the sound. And ever since then, I've always been interested in music in one form or another. I love jazz. I love folk music. I love electronic music. Rock music, of course, grew up hearing lots of that. But now, I get one little synthesizer. I used to run that. But I've got a bank of synthesizers and a whole studio set up, and I can just start producing music from my mind. I get an idea, I get the tones and sounds I want, and I'm off to creating. And if you look me up on Bandcamp, God's Got Shepherd, you can find some of my music there. And over on the Cyclical Dreams record label, I have 4 releases that are out on their label. Now another one coming out this June, so there'll be even more.
These instruments, these basic instruments, but screens, oscilloscope screens of them, are used to monitor signals coming in from outside the Earth's atmosphere, replies to the homing signal, which I am sending out on a 24-hour basis, day in and day out through the Earth's atmosphere. They can either home in on this signal, or they can reply to it. And by replying to it, we are able to pick up their signal if it is within a range of our equipment. We're able to pick it up and see it on these instruments displays in the screens and hear it at the same time. And shortly, with the installation of some new equipment that we're working on, we'll be able to analog and store this data like in a computer. Well, this data communication information is now coming us from Strategic Air Command, which will be giving UFO data. And I will be verifying this data by our own instruments at the complex. This is a readout. The device is now reading out, or printing out on the paper what data is coming in. Printout, I will then take over to the control console and check reference settings for ranges and zones on this unidentified aircraft. And by checking these, I may also pick up any signals that the UFOs may be sending out, if they do send out any signals. And we will pick them up with these circuits by adjusting them and setting them up for this different, these frequencies. Must be on here, but just is not operating the way it should be. In the complex, but also in a small laboratory to create and study silicon life forms. In the event that any of these invaders who come from another world who are equipped and studied now to be equipped to penetrate, attack, or destroy any of these aliens that should come to this planet here. I'm doing tests now on a substance which will attack the very cellular structure and break it down to the molecular components, which would leave the aliens as virtual weapons. This is just a small portion of the energy that is produced by this force field generator. Force field energizer unit. The range that you're seeing now is only 20,500 volts, but it can produce in the millions of volts if necessary. And this is another device used in the limits creating the silicon light as a process by which electricity charges the very molecular structure and creates the light, helps to create light in the structure. This is one of my small subsonic guns that was used to defend the ground.
That's the mad side.
I figured I had to share that with you. It was the superintendent of the Traverse City Public Schools, his son, and his good friend, John Powell, Mike Johnston, and John Powell, that made that film on 8mm back in the day. Sort of a mockumentary, but it was a lot of fun. It was just something kind of special. And I wanted to share it. So for the last moment, some laughter. But it is a serious topic, and there are so many things yet. We just barely scratched the infinite surface of it. There's so much more to come. Sure, we'll all be hearing a lot more. And I'm more than willing to come back and share any new details that I have, even do a live music performance here sometime. So, any other questions?
You still transmitting?
No, not like I used to. I don't even have the transmitter set up. We don't have room for it at the house right now. Just got the studio set up where I can record and do podcasts and maybe things like that and produce music and do very similar work. Try to promulgate that work, carry it on forward. Yeah, I'd like to work with that some more. And more importantly, I'd like to be able to share that knowledge and experience with other people. Have them come in, see it working, see what it did, how it worked, that kind of thing. It would be fun. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but can I share with people about Mutual UFO Network?
Oh, certainly.
You
Please
know
do.
about that?
Yes, I think this will be very, come on up here. Can you,
And probably a lot of you have seen that through certain programs on TV. and everything. I've been a member of MUFON, UFO, Mutual UFO Network, for a number of years. And I've been a field investigator for them, and I follow up with people who saw things. And I've done a couple of very interesting reports. The first one, after I was trained to do this, the first one was back in November of '99, and I ended up interviewing 12 people in our area. I live down by Torchlight Village, and originally the first people I heard about had seen something over like Pine Hill Nursery down there, and that's a long story, but anyway. I would urge any of you who see anything unexplainable like that, you can get to make a report on it at mufon.com or net, I can't remember which it is.
.org. I don't know. I try to remember, I think it was .org.
Yeah, but anyway, I would urge you to make a report on seeing unexplainable things, because I've done a lot of research reading over the years, and there's a lot that people have reported, so it's been all very interesting. I'm kind of retired from it now. I don't have the energy anymore, but the very last report I followed up on was a woman in the Grand Rapids area who actually had a beam of light come through her bedroom window, left like radiation burns on her face, and since that time, she's had experiences with this healing beings and things, and she scared the bejesus out of her. She was just appreciative of the fact I would listen to her and tell her about, similar things I've read about and everything. And I'm trying to get her to put together an article. She's kept a lot of notes. Put together an article that we can publish in the Mutual UFO Journal, because it's so interesting, so mind-boggling. But anyway, I won't take any more time.
It's MUFON dot.
MUFON.
Dot.
It's .com?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
At least that site looks at UFOs, so it's the same.
If you ever see anything, make a report. At night, and they report things. And Peter Davenport, he was the person people would call reports into. What did he call this? Whatever he called it.
Oh,
Huh?
trying to remember, that's the, UFROP or National UFO Reporting Center?
Yeah, initially you reportings or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what we first heard about these people over Torchlight Village, and couldn't see if there was and then neighbors start talking to each other, and they heard about other people in the area saw things at the same time. And there was even an article in the Record Eagle saying, what was it? Blah, 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 UFO or whatever. And there was also, something was also seen at the same general time over Green Lake by Interlochen.
Amazing, yeah, amazing.
Significant report on it. They published my report in Michigan MUFON. newsletter and then international. It's not been published.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's an interesting study. Who knows why I was so interested, but it's just fascinating thing. And I didn't even see anything as close as what you saw. Anyway.
Any other questions, folks?
Thank you.
Thank you.